I just made a healthier cookie recipe following Broma Bakery's healthy gluten-free chocolate chip cookies. The batter is in the freezer right now and almost ready to bake. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, I want to try the same recipe with a couple different variations. I thought maybe I would bring you along with me and see what the outcome is. How different are the cookies really when we work with what we have in the kitchen instead of what's written on the recipe? I'm just a little bit curious, you know what I mean? And I figured, why not bring you along with me? Because I made one batch and I just feel like it's not gonna be enough for my family. I'm gonna take it to my family's house today to share. And I wanna make another batch, but I don't have the same ingredients, right? So I'm like, just finished the almond flour, just finished the cashew butter, which means I have to pivot if I wanna make another batch. And instead of almond flour, use oat flour. Instead of cashew butter, use peanut butter. And I'm thinking even instead of butter, use coconut oil and see what the difference in the outcome is between the two, the one that follows the recipe and the one that uses substitutions with what I have lying around. Just finished the cashew butter, moving over to peanut butter, which obviously means they'll probably have more of a peanut-y flavor, but I don't think the texture should change that much from the switch in nut butters because nut butter texture is pretty much the same all around. Mixing that up so that I get a really solid, no oil, cohesive thing here going, you know what I mean? I like doing this and I like showing it because people are always asking about substitutions. What can I use instead of XYZ? And I'm always like, literally, whatever has the same texture and kind of same flavor profile that you have lying around in your kitchen. You can Google it, but people don't like to Google anymore. They like to just comment on your post and ask you. If you guys follow me on literally any other platform, my name is The Practical Nutritionist. So over on YouTube is the only channel where my name on my handle is not The Practical Nutritionist, and it's just Lena at Bed. But I do like practical recipes that make sense in the long haul. I think with practical recipes that still make you feel really good, that are still healthy, comes working with what's in the kitchen, working with what's in the house, right? Like not always needing to go to the grocery store for the perfect batch of ingredients. So I feel like this is a little bit practical to work with substitutions and actually see what can I use instead of what's written. I'm gonna use coconut oil instead of butter this time. And because we're melting down both, I don't think, oh, this is hard to open. All right, I had to have David open that for me off camera. I don't think we'll notice a texture change between the butter and the coconut oil because they are both melted down before they go into the batter. And they should both solidify in the final stage of freezing or refrigerating before they're baked. But I would imagine we would notice a flavor difference between butter and coconut oil because there is a pretty significant flavor difference. Does it matter if someone can't tolerate dairy or has a dairy allergy and literally can't use butter? No, I don't think it matters. I think it's a really great swap in that case. But I think it's worth noting if you are somebody who is just doing it for health reasons, switching between butter and coconut oil. If you get a high quality butter and a high quality coconut oil, I don't really think one is gonna be significantly better than the other, nutritionally. Melt this down. While that's melting in the microwave, I'm gonna do 6 tablespoons of maple syrup. And here, that's a change that I'm not gonna switch between the two recipes. It's practically speaking, it's something I still have. And I can't use a granulated sweetener. It needs to be a liquid sweetener because that's what the original recipe calls for. When the original recipe calls for a liquid, you need to match it with a liquid. Well, granulated sugar is technically considered a wet ingredient. I still don't think it's the right texture for a one-to-one swap with maple syrup. Melted coconut oil, 2 teaspoons of vanilla, and an egg, which I did use an egg in the last one. You could use a flax egg, and that would be a really good swap to see the texture difference. I am curious, I just don't have any flax seeds right now. I need to re-up on that. Mixing all the wet ingredients until combined, so that means that you're mixing, basically the egg is what needs to be incorporated most here, the egg and the oil. We don't want any separation. They should be completely emulsified together and combined. The batter looks identical to the first batch, but it does taste slightly different. Obviously, I think that's peanut butter. That's expected when you use a different nut butter, but it's smooth, it's creamy, it looks really good. This is where I think if we're gonna notice a difference, it's gonna be here. My opinion, oat flour versus almond flour is gonna yield the most significantly different results. So it calls for 1 3/4 cups of almond flour, which means we need about 2 cups of oats before they're blended, or 1 3/4 cups of oats after they're blended. We need them blended down to a very, very fine flour. I think this is gonna yield the biggest difference because almond flour has more fat in it, oat flour has more carbs in it, right? So I think, and carbs soak up more liquid. So this is going to be I think yield a denser cookie by using oat flour instead of almond flour. And one adjustment I could make, and I think I might make, is using a little bit less than 1 3/4 cups and a little bit closer to 1 1/2 cups. I think that could be a really easy switch to not yield the densest cookie and still a similar result, but with a different flour. Nutritionally, there are going to be some differences between almond flour and oat flour. Almond flour, again, is paired with more fat, and I think more calories, don't quote me on that. And oat flour is going to come with more fiber and more of a carb source. Should I measure this? Yeah. 1, so it does blend down to about 1 1/2 cups, under 1 3/4 for sure. Oh, no, it doesn't. There's a little bit more. I'm going to hold off on this last quarter. We'll just do 1 1/2. Baking soda, we're going to keep this the same, 1/2 teaspoon. And salt, we're going to keep the same, about another 1/2 teaspoon. Then I'm just going to mix until combined. And if I see that it's like very watery or something, then I will add the other 1/4 cup of oat flour. And if it's not, then I won't. See, I think this looks very similar to my first batter, and I feel like I'm hesitant to add anything else. But it is liquidy and watery, but that's how the other batter is too, and then it gets hard in the fridge. So what I anticipate happening is I anticipate the oats soaking up more moisture while it sits in the fridge before we bake. Most cookie dough batters these days, unless you're using butter that's cold or coconut oil that's cold, typically, from like right off the bat, typically your batter is going to have to sit in the fridge if it's melted or browned or something like that. Your batter is gonna have to sit in the fridge to solidify again. Ours needs to sit in the fridge to solidify again. That's what my first batch is doing right now. So that's normal, that's common for this recipe. That's not impacted by our swaps. I think if I add the other 1/4 cup of oat flour, I run the risk of it soaking up too much moisture, being too thick, so I'm not gonna add it. So that's one swap that we do with oat flour. We're typically gonna reduce the ratio, the amount of flour that comes in if we're swapping that with almond flour. But if we're swapping 1 for 1 white flour with oat flour, then we can typically use it 1 for 1 ratios because white flour soaks up a lot of moisture too. Almond flour adds moisture. Does that make sense? That tastes really good. Definitely peanut buttery. We're gonna put this in the freezer to set for about 20-30 minutes. All right, the first batter is out and it looks pretty good out of the freezer. It looks good. So what I want to do is I want to add chocolate chips to half of this. So I'm going to scoop half without any chocolate chips and half with chocolate chips. And the reason I do half with and half without is because my sister doesn't like chocolate, and on Fridays I go to my mom's house for dinner and all of my siblings come and I'm sharing with them. That's also why I made 2 batches, because I wanted there to be enough for everybody. This dough is okay. Actually, I think it needs more time in the freezer, so I think what I'll do is I'll scoop it and then I'll move it back to the fridge or the freezer to set for a little longer. I'm gonna use these chocolate chunks from Trader Joe's. I think that's where they're from. I always eyeball my chocolate chips, just mix that in with a spoon. And I think I'll just give these 30 more minutes in the fridge. It does look, I think, thicker than the other one. Feels soft, but you can also see the oat grain because oat flour doesn't bend, well, it does blend down as fine as the almond flour. It's just my preferred blender of choice was in the dishwasher. But, so you can see the texture of the oats a little bit more. So let's do the same thing here and scoop half the batter without chocolate chips and half the batter with chocolate chips, and we will just eyeball the chocolate chips. It's scooping out really nicely. I think a little bit more solidified. So definitely glad we didn't add that extra 1/4 cup of oat flour. That's why not everything can always be a 1 for 1 swap, and you have to understand what one flour is offering over another flour. Is it adding more moisture? Is it adding less moisture? Does it soak up more moisture? Like, what is going on? Same thing with the fat that you use. Does it solidify easily? Does it stay watery? Same thing with the sugar you use. Oven is preheated, so the almond flour ones are going into the oven for, I think they're gonna just need about 10 to 12 minutes. Okay, these are fresh out of the oven, almond butter, cashew butter, and regular dairy butter. I think they look pretty good. I mean, they look great. They look like normal cookies. I really like the crackly top on this one. They'll deflate just a little bit. They literally just came out of the oven, so they should deflate a teeny tiny bit. All right, oatmeal ones just came out of the oven, and we immediately noticed a difference that the oatmeal ones are definitely puffier. They didn't deflate as much as the almond flour ones. I could push them down. I think if you make them with oat flour, just give them a little push down. I don't know that reducing the oat flour would help that much, but you could just press them down before you bake them. When you put them side by side, you can see this change a lot better, or this difference a lot better. So this one just looks more like a normal chocolate chip cookie. And I don't know, I would say that's due to the almond flour more than anything else. But remember, oops, these are really soft. We did use coconut oil in this and regular butter in this. That could play a role, but I don't really think so. I think that would play more of a flavor role rather than a texture role. Let's open up this one. Inside, it's still really soft, so they're falling apart a little bit, but they look really good on the inside. Definitely look peanut buttery. You can see like that color. Oops, falling apart, but that's my fault for not letting them cool completely. I'm gonna swap this with this pan because this cookie already broke and I don't want to break anymore before I go to my mom's. So this is the inside of the almond flour cookie, which I have to say looks more like a traditional cookie to me. It looks a little bit better. This one looks healthier. I think that has definitely the oat flour is the biggest difference here between the almond flour. Oat flour, regular butter, coconut oil. Next up is a taste test. We'll start with the peanut butter and the oat flour. Remember, this is coconut oil. Definitely peanut buttery. That's the only thing you get is peanut butter in there. The oat flour gives it a bit of a bite. It tastes more like an oatmeal peanut butter cookie rather than like a healthier chocolate chip cookie. You don't taste the coconut oil though at all, so I think that's a really good one-for-one swap if you're going dairy-free. This one is much more like a traditional chocolate chip cookie. A little bit grainy from your almond flour versus like a white flour. A little bit more grainy than a white flour, but definitely a smoother texture overall than the peanut butter. You can't tell the difference between the coconut oil and butter, I think, at all. So if you wanted to use coconut oil, again, that's the easiest swap. The nut butter makes a really big difference in flavor, but not in texture. So yeah, overall flour is gonna make the biggest difference in texture, even when we reduce the amount of oat flour. Still yields a really good product, but different. Thanks for watching. That's my little substitutions episode. Just real life, you know, in the kitchen. This is what real life looks like. A lower barrier to entry to making healthy recipes because you don't need to go out and buy fancy ingredients. You really can just use what you have, like plain oats ground into a flour in your house. But if you want to go get the fancy ingredients, you can do that too because they yield a really nice result. Yay! Happy baking! Don't forget to like and subscribe and let me know what you want to see next. Bye!